No, you're all right. We can hear you.
Yeah,
Oh,
you
we're
still
all
here?
right.
Yeah. Ladies and gents, boys and girls, welcome to this special interview. And we have the legend himself, Mr. Frank Clark. Let's get into it. Evening, everybody. Hope you're doing well, and welcome back to FFTV, where we are delighted to be hosting for the second time the wonderful Frank Clark. Forest manager, got us to third, took us to Europe. That would have been our last European campaign under him. And what we're going to find out tonight is really getting into the mind of a manager, how they dealt with the pressures of being in a title race, in a European race, things like that, what managers have to deal with in and out, and how does this current team compare to that team back when we finished third under Mr. Clark. So make sure you've hit the like, make sure you've subscribed as well. Get your questions in. We'll bring some super chat questions up for Frank as well. Let's start. Frank, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. I'm a little bit tired. I had a tough weekend. I've been up in the northeast over the weekend. Went to the game yesterday and didn't sleep too well last night.
How you find the season, Frank? Like, talk to us about that game yesterday. Obviously, you've got some Geordie roots and Forest roots as well, but how was that game for you from your perspective?
Well, the first half was a bit of a horror show. I didn't enjoy that one little bit. The second half obviously was much better, but I was very disappointed that we didn't get something from it. I thought, in fact, go over the 90 minutes. I thought we deserved something from it, but it wasn't to be.
Yeah. How do you see Forest season so far, Frank? A lot of people have been surprised by the way it's gone. Did you see this coming at all?
No, I've been pleasantly surprised. Standing here now with 47 points is not something that I thought was going to happen, but it has. And full credit to the manager and the players, of course. It's normally over the last few years we've been looking over our shoulder at the relegation, so it's nice not to have to do that.
Yeah, and that's what we really want to get into. So, what for you is it when you look at this Forest team, like in isolation? Let's not compare anything yet, but what do you think the key changes are that Nuno's made this year to get Forest from a relegation battle to be pushing at one stage for a title race, and at the very least now for a Champions League position?
Right. Well, the better recruitment. The last couple of windows, forgetting the January one, but the last couple of windows, the talent identification was a lot better. I don't know who's responsible for that. I think Nuno would have a part in it, but it's not solely down to him. We have several people who are employed in the talent ID department, and they've brought in some better players. You know, Milenkovic is a proper centre back. Murillo obviously came last season, and we just got some better players. Anderson has been a wonderful acquisition, and Sells is playing out of his skin. So we've got better players. We've got a bit more depth in the squad as well. And Nuno has got them playing in a way that suits them, a way that he likes to play, and it's all going very well.
What is it about what you've seen so far this season, Frank, that you think is the major change? Is it the players are more together? Is it what's happened on the pitch, and the fans believe in what we're seeing on the pitch as well?
I don't think the players are any better friends than they've ever been, but they're all better players. You know, if you bring some better players into your team, it makes the players that are already in your team, it makes them better players as well. And they're putting some excellent performances. They're playing in a counter-attacking way, which suits them, most of them. And of course, because we've had some wonderful results, the crowd, to be fair, has really got behind them. I mean, the crowd were really behind them last season as well. But the the atmosphere that they're creating at the City Ground this season is something else.
Yeah, fantastic. And I guess what I want to move into now is just really getting to understand the psyche from a manager's perspective, because I feel we've got a real unique opportunity because you've lived through this. And I feel we're seeing a lot of parallels between this current team, the position they're finding themselves in, and what you did for us. Obviously, that was off the back of a straight promotion, so some would argue was even harder. But I guess our first question on this section, Frank, is what were the expectations going into that season where we did finish third, be it from yourself or the board?
Well, as far as I was concerned, it was just to stay up. You know, we'd come up. I was only able to buy one player, and that was I had to fight and struggle to get that, to sign Brian Roy, who again made us a better team. But my aim really was to survive in the division. I wasn't looking at the top 3, 4. I wasn't looking at any positions really. It was just a matter of getting enough points to survive, and then going from there.
So after having such a cracking start in that season, Frank, did the expectations change very quickly, or did you just try and manage everything around you? Because we did have a cracking start, and we were
12 games unbeaten.
Yeah, we did. Well, obviously that surprised everybody, including me, and it raised expectations for the fans and certainly for the board. But the player, I had a group of very mature players, if you like. Some of whom were quite experienced, and I don't think it fuzzled them. That all of a sudden people are talking about us doing quite well. My approach was always just. I know it sounds a bit hackneyed, is to take it one game at a time.
Is that really the mentality, though, Frank? When you're actually in there, is that the only way you can approach it? Or
that was mine. That's the only way I knew of doing it. You can't afford to look too far ahead or get too far to yourself and say, well, if we do this, if we win this one, then in 4 games' time we've got another one. I've never been able to do that. I've always just let's win the next game and see where that takes us. And that was certainly the approach that we had at that time.
That's fascinating to hear. So when we do hear managers now, Frank, saying the next game is the most important, I mean, we hear it a lot with Nuno. He's been told, "Oh, you've got before Newcastle, it was like Newcastle, Arsenal, then Man City," and he always comes out and says, "My only focus is Newcastle, be it now Arsenal." Is that a real thing? It's not a bit of kind of media training, then? Is that legitimately how managers look at it?
Well, certainly I do, and I think Nuno does. One of the lovely things I like about Nuno is that after we've had recently had some resounding wins, and we hear stories about the players celebrating in the dressing room and singing, the crowd are singing, and everybody, I mean, after the 7-0 game, the atmosphere is fantastic, and Nuno comes out of the dressing room and immediately says, "Yeah, it's great. I'm really pleased everybody's celebrating. We want to give the fans an excuse to celebrate, but I'm thinking about next week's game." I'd love to hear that, and that certainly was my approach.
That's fascinating. I've always felt it was like, I was saying, Rob, like a bit of media training that they say it because it's the right thing to say, but to hear it from Frank.
Listen, when I was managing, we didn't have any media training at all. You had to live and die by your results and have your wits about you when you were dealing with the media. But it was not always easy. Sometimes you said things that you regret, that you wish I hadn't said. I certainly remember doing it once when Lars Bohin had left us to go to Blackburn, and I had to do a press room interview with all the press were in there. And somebody said, "Why do you think he's gone to Blackburn?" And I took some change out of my pocket and threw it on the table. And I wasn't very proud of myself about that. I was quite disappointed when I thought about that. But
we were all thinking it, so that's fine.
yeah, I know that.
Yeah.
It wasn't the right thing to do because I like Lars. He did a great job for me, and I didn't hold anything against him, and I shouldn't have done that. But we didn't have many media training. We didn't have the press officer from the club coming into the interviews that we were doing. We didn't have a press officer. I was the press officer as well. So it's just an instinctive thing,
Yeah. Pat here says, Frank, your media training was Cloughie. Did you take anything from the great man when it came to talking?
Well, I don't think he had.
All you?
I don't think he had any media training. That's for sure. But he had a great a great idea of I don't know whether if you remember this, when he was being interviewed on television. If you're being interviewed one-on-one and there's a television camera there, the thing is, when you answer the question, there's a temptation to look at the guy who's asked you the question. Cloughie never did that. He looked straight down the camera, so that the people watching the program felt as though he was talking to them, not to the interviewer. And I thought that was fantastic. But that was him. Nobody had told him to do that. That was just his instinct.
Yeah. Moving it back on to that season, Frank, it was about kind of October where we started tasting a couple of defeats, and then you got it back on track. But if I remember rightly, Rob, it was that period between January and February where we took.
I think there was a period. There was a period in the middle of the season where Stan was out.
Yeah.
And obviously he was such an important player for the team. But if we look back at the progression through that season, we started off with a very good unbeaten run, and we were second at one point. And then in the mid-season, there was a period where he was out, and we dropped back down to fifth. And then over the last period of the season, we clawed our way back up to third again. Yeah. And I think there's a little bit of a parallel with what we're going through now, because we've just, even though we've got a fully fit squad now, we've just had 3 defeats in 4, and we've got 2 horrible games coming up. And it's like, can we sort of get through that and still be in third, or are we going to have to claw our way back again?
I think what we'd like to know, Frank, is what did you do in that period to re-steady the ship? Was there anything in particular that happened at that point?
No, I didn't. I wasn't panicking about it. I wasn't lying awake thinking, how can I change this? I just felt that 1 or 2 things were going against us. As you said, Stan had got injured, and we were having a problem scoring goals. But I thought if we keep doing the same things and the right things, then we'll be all right. And that's what happened. That's what happened. And I think that's what Nuno will be doing now. About 3 weeks ago, I remember saying to someone, just leading up to the culmination of the Brighton game, that Nuno was having an absolutely magic spell where every team selection he got right, every tactical change he made worked out for him, every decision he made was working for him. Now, that is impossible for that to continue. I don't know how clever you are or how good you are as a manager. Sometimes the fates, if you like, are going to turn against you. But you've got to maintain the belief in yourself that what you're doing is the right thing. I mean, like yesterday, I know we played very poorly in the first half, but look at their goals. 2 of them were deflections. One of them was an iffy penalty. Possible it was a penalty or not, but it was iffy. And the third one was a strange one. Whereas a month ago, those deflections off the ball would have kept them out of the goals, or Matt would have saved them, you know.
Yeah, that's exactly what I said.
So it's just he's going through a little spell at the minute. Like he picked the back 3 on Saturday last week against Fulham, and it didn't work. So he's changed it for yesterday, and it didn't work again. Whether I would have lost the games, I'm not saying that was the reason, but it's just interesting that 1 or 2 things are going against them. And I think he'll keep believing that, in what he's doing. You know, he did a great job at Wolverhampton. Everybody keeps saying, "Oh, he was a disaster at Tottenham." Well, Tottenham is a really, really difficult club to manage. You know, it's not like any other football club. It's very difficult. So I'm disregard totally what happened to him there, and I'm sure that he'll be thinking, well, we're on the right path. We're still doing the right things, and I'll keep making those decisions, and hopefully it'll turn back for him. You know.
Frank, there's been a little bit of discussion and maybe a little bit of criticism amongst some of the fan base about that trip to Dubai recently. What are your thoughts on doing things like that? Is it generally good for camaraderie, or can it be disruptive?
Well, no, I don't think it's disruptive. I don't know. I'm not a great lover of Dubai. I've been there once myself, but I'd never go back again. But that's me. I thought it was a good idea. Especially coming the day after the Brighton result, you know. It would give him time to really spend a time working with the players in a bit of warm weather, good environment, probably. I don't think it was that. The thing that has annoyed me most of all in the last few weeks, and you know, you might accuse me of making excuses for them here, the schedule that was thrown at them because of the FA Cup was a disgrace. They had to play at wherever it was, Exeter, on the Tuesday night. On the Tuesday night. Now, even if we'd won the game in normal time, they wouldn't have got back home till 3 o'clock in the morning. That's 3 o'clock on Wednesday morning. On Friday morning, they're off again, travelling to London to play Fulham. It's no preparation. I mean, I don't think Nuno said anything about it. And I'm not trying to make excuses for them, but that was terrible preparation for the players who had to go and play at Fulham after that 2-day journey to Exeter.
Can that be disruptive, Frank? Like in terms of like the normal schedule, if you like, of a Monday to Saturday? Do the players get into that rhythm and routine?
Well, it is, but that was exceptional because we're not talking about playing Leicester down the road. We're talking about playing Exeter, which is a hell of a long way away. And I know they flew back, but even flying back, I bet it was 3 o'clock before the players got to bed. So that really kind of wipes out Wednesday completely. You know, it's like yourself, if you have that kind of late night, you're not feeling too good for a couple of days. So they did a little bit. Could only do a little bit of training on the Thursday, and then Friday they're off travelling down to London again. You know, and I didn't think that was right at all. And I wasn't surprised when I didn't see the game at Fulham, but one or two people have told me that they looked tired and a little bit below par, and I wasn't surprised at that at all.
In your experience, Frank, when you've had to do trips like that yourself with the players in various teams that you've managed and coached, will that make an effect on what their output on the pitch? Will it affect their output on the pitch, not having the rest, doing the travelling in between games when you got such big trips away from home? Does that affect the players on the pitch?
Yeah, certainly it can do. Yeah, it's an issue. You know, it's important that they get plenty of rest and a good night's sleep and that kind of thing. Especially at this stage of the season, they've been going at it now since. Well, it started pre-season in July, and it's high intensity stuff every week in the Premier League. You know, there's no way you can coast through a game in the Premier League, no matter who you're playing against, and it's hard. So they need to be able to rest. And I just thought that week that was caused by having the cup tie on the Tuesday. And the other thing as well, of course, playing the cup tie on the Tuesday, nobody other than Exeter and Forest were interested in it. There was hardly any press about it.
Yeah,
it was just like something on I tagged on at the end of the FA Cup weekend, you know. I thought it was an outrageous decision by the Football Association.
Yeah, and that's nothing that Forest can protest at the time, can they? Like once the decision has been made.
I'm glad Nuno has not come out and tried to make any excuse like that. I haven't seen it anyway about it. And there's no way you can protest about it, because when the FA make that decision, you're stuck with it, you know.
Yeah. Just coming back on to the season where we finished third, Frank, as you said at the start, your expectation was just survive. Did it change internally at all, especially when we were getting to the stage where clearly we were staying up and what have you? Was there any movement internally from the board, or maybe your own kind of mindset about where you wanted Forest to finish? And when did that happen, if it did?
No, I mean, I never looked that far ahead. As I've said to you before, it was just let's get to the next game, see if we can get 3 points and see where that takes us. Obviously, the last 3 weeks of the season got a little bit different then, because it was looking like we had a really good chance to finish third, and that's what we did.
But there was no pressure from above you to say that, look where we are, you've done, what a job you've done. You know, we need a top 3 finisher, we want European football, etc.
No. They want the only pressure they put on me from the day I came was to say that we expect you to get us straight back up this season when they'd been relegated, and then we expect you to survive, you know. Which was quite enough at the time, but no, I can't remember any of that.
Would that have changed the way you approached it at all? If you know, halfway through that season where Forest are just constantly within the top 5, if they turned to you and said, right, Frank, we need European football now, we've got, you know, these plans for next season, etc. Would that have made you react any differently, or would you have continued in that mindset that you were currently in?
Well, no, it wouldn't have changed my way of working at all. It would still have been, like one game at a time, you know, and let's see where we are at the end of it.
So has that ever happened in your managerial career, where you've gone through a season where it's back to even Leyton Orient, where it's turned into a promotion season, your expectations change? Does that change the way you approach games, the mentality that you approach games with, and what you say to the players? Does that change with what you're targeting, basically, by the end of the season?
No. I never set targets to the players, really, other than winning the next game. I never said, listen, the target is to finish top, or the target is to finish 4th, or the target is... No, I never set targets to the players. We and the staff, we kind of had our own ideas as the season went on, obviously, and we were towards the end of the season, the staff, we were aware of that we were in with a chance of qualifying for Europe, but it never affected the way we approached the job.
And that's why I ask. I mean, because right now the fans are dreaming of Europe for next season for Forest, and that surely does that bleed into the dressing room? Do the players feel that pressure at any point?
Well, listen, it's a great thing that the fans can dream of Europe. What's one of the lovely things I think about this season, that the fans can't dream about Europe, because if you can't dream about your club doing well, what the hell's the point of being a fan? And it's been a long time, obviously, since Forest fans have been able to even consider Europe. So it's a great thing for them, I think, you know. But the players, management and players can't afford to start dreaming about anything, you know. You got to keep approaching the next game, because the game had a nasty habit of biting you in the backside, which has happened over the last 2 or 3 weeks, you know.
Well, I keep hearing that the manager and the players never look at the table, which I just don't believe, because I look at the table about every 15 minutes. So
I don't believe that either. But that's what they tell you, like. But they'll be looking at the table. Don't worry.
So were you monitoring the table yourself, Frank? At the time, would you be? Yeah.
I've been monitoring the table, and I'm still looking. I've got 1 or 2 friends who keep saying that we want to go and try and catch Liverpool and Arsenal, so we want the teams to go and beat them. And I'm thinking I'd rather these teams, Liverpool and Arsenal, kept winning and beating the teams that are below us. You know, I'm looking below us. I'm a bit worried about the number of I'm calling big clubs with a lot of money who are sort of pushing us very closely from below. So I look at the table definitely, but
what about back then?
I'm just a fan like everybody else.
Listen,
I'm dreaming about Europe as well now. You know?
Who's worrying you most, Frank, out of the teams that are snapping at our heels? Because you got Newcastle, Bournemouth, Man City, Chelsea. Who's the one that is
the best team I've seen this season, and not because they hammered us 5-0. Bournemouth. I've watched them a few times on live games on the television, and I'm really impressed with how they're playing. They look.
Even then, I mean, they slipped up on the weekend against Wolves, wasn't it? And Wolves are fighting for their lives. You know, it just shows the league.
I mean, that can happen in the Premier League. I mean, any team can trip you up, you know. So, but Bournemouth is the one I'd be worried about.
Yeah.
Newcastle. After yesterday, I'm not too sure. They are a fantastic attacking side, but defensively they're not great. You can get at them, you know, as we proved in the second half. But certainly Bournemouth. And you know, you worry about Man City. I mean, they've spent, I don't know, how much did they spend? How many millions did they spend in the window?
In Jan, 150-ish, yeah.
So, I worry about them all really. But as I say, Nuno will just be looking up to Arsenal now and saying, how can we get 3 points on Wednesday night?
Yeah. In terms of the external pressures, Frank, what we hear a lot of currently in mainstream media is the expectation that Forest are going to drop like a stone, that they're in a false position. A lot of these narratives, I'm sure you've seen them. Were you facing any of that from the media back in your time, where people, I assume, would have thought we were in a false position, and there's always those narratives that they try and build to make a story? Was there any of that going on around you?
Yes, I mean, obviously there was when I was playing here. You know, I'm sure. Well, most of you lads are too young to remember, but the season we won the first division title, the pundits and the critics and the newspaper men were continually saying the bubble's going to burst. You know.
Yeah.
They said that until the end of the season. So there was a bit of that, and I don't think the players. It didn't worry me, but I don't think my players at that time, got the credit they deserved for that achievement of finishing third and qualifying for the UEFA Cup, which would have got them in the Champions League nowadays. But you know, back in those days, the Champions League was for champions. And I don't think the players really got enough credit certainly from the media, certainly from the London media. But the good thing for the players in that team was they got recognition from the game itself, because 4 of them got picked for England at the same time at the end of that season. Piercy obviously was a regular in the England squad. Stan got a couple of caps. Steve Stone got picked in the England squad. And Colin Cooper got picked in the England squad. So, you know, there were people in the game who knew a thing or two about it, who were recognising what those players had achieved.
Yeah. Do you think Ian Wone should have ever got a look in? Because England were struggling on that left-hand side back in that time.
Ian did get very close to it. Not in that season, but the third season. And Terry Venables was the manager. He asked me about Ian. He was watching him, so he had got close to it. I think I helped in a little way. The play Ian did it himself. I think he became a better player, a little bit better a player when I came, because I encouraged him to try and score more goals. You know, and that. Not the season when we finished third, but I think the season afterwards, if I remember correctly, he got into double figures. Well, he'd never been anywhere near that in his career, and Terry was starting to have a look at him, but nothing ever came of it. You know.
I think you need to have that conversation with Elliot Anderson, please. If you just whatever you said to Wone, just say it to Elliot Anderson, please, because that's what's missing from his game. Don't you think?
Yeah, yeah, he hasn't scored a lot of goals, but listen, he's just a young lad, you know. He's still making his way in the game. And
Do you think he's a possible England player in the future? Because I've heard it spoken about in the last couple of weeks for the first time.
by whom?
I've seen it on some social media, and I think I even saw it on the BBC.
All right, well, it must be true if it's on the BBC. Well, no, listen, Elliott's a wonderful prospect, a very good player. Makes me feel old every time I watch him play, because I used to play with his grandfather.
Oh wow!
Really?
His grandfather was a player at Newcastle back in the late '60s, called Jeff Allen. Jeff was a left winger who played was in the team that started off the Face Cup campaign, and then got injured playing, would you believe, at the City Ground against Peter Hindley, and never played again. Now, I'm not accusing Peter of anything, but you know, Peter was a tough tackling right back. I didn't see the challenge, so I'm not accusing Peter of anything. But Jeff was unfortunate, got injured that day, and never played again. And he's Elliott's grandfather. So I feel a bit older when I see him play.
Well, Frank, you say that we got some Geordies in the chat as well. They got much love for you. Alan's saying Jeff Allen was brilliant, and he's also said joining late, but on behalf of his dad, would like to thank Frank for the Fairs Cup win in '69 as well.
Yeah, happy days that was. Yeah, and Jeff played in the first game of that campaign against Feyenoord, the Dutch team, and they had an international right back of renown, and on the night Jeff destroyed him, absolutely destroyed him, and we beat them 4-0. So he went down in a blaze of glory, but it was a real tragic accident for him.
Fantastic. Just before we go into the next section, just a quick reminder, guys, please do hit that like. Make sure you subscribed as well. Seb with the £5 says, you read. Thank you so much, Seb. We've got Mark with 30-month membership saying his favorite game was the 7-1 away at Sheffield Wednesday, where they even applauded us. That's how good that performance was. Do you remember that one?
I remember that game very well.
I bet you do.
I thought that was, what's the word really? That was the epitome of how I wanted that team to play. Perfection in almost every minute of the game, apart from Des giving the penalty away. But it was a wonderful display of counter-attacking football. And I don't know whether you remember at the time, Stan, who caused me a few problems, of course, Stan wasn't speaking to about 2 or 3 of the other players.
Oh, really?
And when they came off at the end of the game, I got them together in the dressing room. I said, listen, that was magnificent. Just think what you could do if you started speaking to each other like. Yeah, it was a good day. It was a good day, that.
Can I ask, who was he not speaking to, or is history in the history there?
Who was what? Sorry?
Who was he not speaking to at the time, player-wise, or are we not going there?
A few of them, really. Stan was as you know, he was a difficult character, and there'd been a little bit of argy-bargy in the dressing room, and people like Brian and Ian Warren, possibly the skipper. You maybe didn't notice a couple of times when Stan scored, not too many of the players actually went to congratulate him. But that was just part of life's wonderful tapestry that I had to deal with at the time.
It wasn't that obvious, actually. So well done for keeping it under wraps, because these days
he's celebrating.
You look at all the drama that surrounded people like Marcus Rashford and people like that. You know, it's like, I think you actually kept it on the down low. So well done.
Well, it was a lot easier then to keep things in house, obviously.
Yeah, without social media and stuff.
No, the only incident that ever got out, we were down at the. You have to remember, at that time we didn't have our own private training fields. We used to train on a pitch down at the river, by the river, that was wide open to all the public. Anybody walking past could just stop and watch the game, and whatever. And we had a practice match one day, and Stan was playing against Alfie Haaland, and Stan knocked him out.
I heard about
So
this. Yeah.
I sent them both off up to the ground, and obviously we were trying to keep it quiet. Didn't want that to come out. And this supporter of ours had witnessed it, and he rang the Sun newspaper, and gave them the story. I don't know if you remember, but at that time the Sun used to pay people £50. Anybody who rang up with a bit of gossip on a football club, they'd pay them £50. So this bloke had rang up and told them about Stan and Alfie having this fight, which I was quite annoyed about, which I said in the paper that I was quite annoyed about. And he sent me a letter, and he said, I'm sorry about that. He said, but that £50 I got enabled me to buy some Christmas presents for my children. So somebody's had to let go. Nowadays, they all get on social media, But,
nowadays, you can't get anything for 50 quid. Not for Christmas anyway.
What is it about Alf Haaland? Because he had the feud with Roy Keane after that, didn't he? So I mean, I never thought he was such
he ended his career, didn't he?
Yeah, I never thought he was such an abrasive character, but there does seem to be a pattern there.
Wasn't Alfie being abrasive? He just tackled Stan, and Stan knocked him out. It was Stan who was abrasive. No, Alfie was okay. Listen, anybody could fall out with Roy Keane. That's not hard to do.
Going back to that season, we had a lot of memorable moments for me. It's and a few people in the chat have already said as well. It's the most memorable season in my life, because I wasn't old enough to see the European Cup wins and the Championship win. But what other than that 7-1 game, is there any other moments that stood out for you, like the away win at Old Trafford, the 4-1 at White Hart Lane? Were there any other moments that really stood out for you, but you still remember to this day?
Those two games you mentioned was really special, especially the game at Tottenham at White Hart Lane, because I believe that was that when Ordeles was the manager and had Klinsmann and all those top players. And
it was a Jerry Francis.
That was a day when everything came into it worked. I was telling you about Nuno and what he does. Everything worked a treat that day, because we made one or two little alterations about how we were playing, because of how we thought Tottenham might play against us. Players carried it out to perfection, and all the London media were there, which made it even more special. That was a real special day, that one.
Can I just pressure on that point? Frank, a little bit? Because as we know, Brian Clough was very staunch. There was no real preparation before games. He wouldn't really focus on the opposition. But obviously, in your day, you had to do a bit more of that. So were there times where you would adapt your play for a specific opposition, like you said, in the Tottenham game?
Not very much. We had a way of playing. We had a group of, as I said before, very mature players. So we didn't spend massive amounts of time on the training pitch, but we'd get match reports. We'd certainly speak more about the opposition than Brian did. I mean, Brian just never spoke about them at all. We would make little tweaks here and this, that, and the other, but nothing too major. And it was okay. It worked.
And do you feel the modern game now has even progressed even further from that? Do you think it is much more tactical than it was even back in your day?
Oh yeah, I mean the analysis that goes on now in football is just unbelievable. Whether that makes it better or worse, I don't know. But that's a fact of life. All the clubs have got about 4 or 5 analysts who get all this stuff on the internet and minutely examine what the opposition might do and how they might hurt them and how that kind of thing.
I feel if I asked you about VAR, you'd probably spend half an hour on a soapbox telling me about that. But just briefly, what your thoughts on VAR and how it's affecting the game nowadays?
Well, I never wanted it brought in the first place. I was vehemently against it. I just thought it would be an irritation and a drag on the games. And having seen it operate, I'm more convinced than ever that I shouldn't have come in. But
Would you get rid of it?
It will come in now, and it'll stay in.
Yeah.
And the only thing I would keep it in for is offsides. When eventually we get this automatics or semi-automatic offside, it does away with all these ridiculous delays when the VAR people are considering and they're looking at it at 15 different angles, when all they need to do is put the lines up and it's yes or no. I would keep it in for offside because it's virtually impossible for the assistant referees to get it right every time, an offside decision. It really is very, very difficult. I would keep it in for that, but everything else I would say I would leave it to the referee. I mean, I just think it puts pressure on the referees. I mean, the penalty yesterday, my own feeling having watched it, I thought it was a penalty. But the referee went and he must have spent 5 minutes looking at the video. Now, if he can't make his mind up in quicker than 5 minutes, he shouldn't have given the penalty.
Exactly.
As simple as that. It's ludicrous.
Well, my point, Frank, was that he's watching it at 10% speed. So it looks like, watch it full speed, and then you understand there's no way he could have got his hand out of the way in time because it's like a quarter of a second that the ball from the ball being kicked.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I don't know what a handball is anymore.
I would, well, that's another thing, of course.
Or what a natural position is. What is a natural position?
What is a natural position, yeah.
Because when you jump up, your arms go up. You're not Sabutio players. When you jump up, your arms go up. And
I think there are two things that are a great help, or could be a great help to the referee, and that's the goal line technology, which is fantastic, and for offsides. Once they get this semi-automatic thing in, where the referee, something's happened, the lines come up, and it's within, 20, 30 seconds, he's either onside or he's offside. It's ridiculous at the minute sometimes, when the length of time it takes him to make a decision. All they have to do is put the lines on, and it's either on or it's off.
Well, I mean, no one's talking about the effect on the supporters because I've really felt inhibited about celebrating goals now because I'm thinking, was there an offside in there? And you have to wait. And I only believe it's a goal when I see them actually kick off.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm the same. That's why, as I say, I never wanted it brought in the first place. And but it's here to stay in somewhere or another. I can't see us ever getting rid of it.
Yeah. Just before we go on to ask you about the European campaign under yourself, Frank, a quick question from one of the viewers from Chocolate. Thank you for the $8, bro. He says, how would you tweak the current team, Frank, if buying new players wasn't permitted, i.e. formation, training, etc.? And he says, thank you for your great work as well and your time at Forest. What would you do, Frank, if you were currently in this 2-game back-to-back losses, 3 losses out of 4? How would you approach this Arsenal game coming up?
Oh, that's a hard question. Not really.
It is.
I don't know enough about a lot of the squad. From what I've seen of it, he's picking the best, probably the best 11 that he's got at the minute. The only question is, will he play with 3 at the back or will he go with a back 4? And I don't want to make that decision really because he knows the players. But I don't know the players well enough. I've watched them, but I am not in favour of one formation against the other. I'm quite happy to go along with Nuno on what he thinks is best for the game that's coming up.
Yeah, fantastic. I do want to move on before we look at the bit of the fun stuff and combined 11s, your team versus Nuno's team. I do want to touch on the European campaign that we had that ended with Bayern Munich, but I'm interested. Let's, all things going well, and let's hope Forest make Europe next season. We always hear about the strains European campaigns have on a squad, that you have to have a squad that's deep enough to compete in Europe and then in the domestic competitions as well. From someone who's been there and lived there, both as a player and as a manager, but I guess kind of more relevant to what we're seeing today, how did you find that European campaign? And in that first summer, did you have to start thinking about the size and shape of the squad for it?
Well, I was always thinking about the size and shape of the squad because we never had any flaming money to get it any bigger, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was difficult. I think we didn't have the greatest record of games that we played on the Saturday after we played in Europe on the Wednesday night. And we only had a squad of about 16, 17 players, so there was no team rotation in those days, really. You know, you pick your best 11 to play week in, week out. Obviously, one or two might pick up a strain; they would have to drop out. But by and large, we were using the same players all the time, and that's how it was in those days. You know, all the teams were the same.
How do you feel? Because obviously we lost two of our best players before going into that campaign, Bohinen, as we mentioned, and Collymore. How do you think things might have gone differently if we'd had those guys in that European campaign? Because that is a real what if, isn't it?
Well, it is, yeah. I mean, and it's hard to speculate. Only to say that with Collymore and Bohinen both in any team, they would make the team better. You know.
Yeah.
Because they were quite low-scoring games.
We had to be more pragmatic because we had a problem scoring goals at times, and we played the first tie was Malmo, wasn't it? Is that right?
Yeah.
Home and away, Malmo.
Yes. Yeah.
And we went across there, and people were a bit cocky, saying, "Oh, it's an only Swedish team, you know, they weren't any problem." And they were quite difficult for us. I think it was 2-1 out there, and then we beat them 1-0 at home. And I quickly learned during that time we had to play in a pragmatic way. I didn't think we were strong enough to go gung ho, especially in the away games. And that's how we tried to approach it. Yeah. Plus, we had what I thought was a very good back five. You know, that were a strong area of the team. The goal Crossley in the back four, Phillips sitting in front of the back four, was probably the strongest area of the team after Stan and Lars had gone.
Yeah.
And in that European campaign, can you see that the players are tiring in those weeks where, in essence, it's 3 games a week, weekend, midweek, weekend? Is it obvious on the players in terms of their fitness levels and things like that?
Not really, no. It isn't obvious, but as I said before, you know, you just need to be like 5% down a little bit on the intensity levels, and you have a problem. Because especially when you play it away, you know, it's traveling and flights and all that kind of thing. So it is an issue. But hey, listen, we're playing this season because we are where we are now. We want to get into Europe.
Yeah.
We want to be in Europe next season. So it's no good moaning next season when we have to play Saturday, Thursday, Sunday. You know, that's what you're playing for. It's no good entering the competition if you don't want to be successful in it. So, you know, we want to get into Europe, and you know the players will have to deal with it, and the club will have to deal with it. It does become an issue. You can see that with Villa this season. You can see it with Brighton last season, but it's an issue. It's what is it? It's an issue that's caused by the success you've had the previous season, and you have to find a way of dealing with it.
So Frank, actually, on that, and linking back to something we were just discussing, that a UEFA Cup run obviously came to an end when we played Bayern Munich, who went on to win it. And that in that game, in the City Ground leg, I seem to remember that we had 2 perfectly good goals disallowed. And I'm just wondering whether with VAR they might have stood and things might have played out differently.
Well, yeah, I suppose that's possible. But Bayern Munich were a very good team. We went in the first leg. I was disappointed out there that we lost 2-1. I thought we played really well out there.
Yeah,
and we could have drawn or even won that game. The second leg, you're right. We didn't get the breaks from the referee, and then they got a lucky deflection on a free kick, and then Mark Crossley made a big mistake and cost us another goal. Now I wouldn't criticise Mark because Mark Crossley was immense for us in that European campaign. He was absolutely superb. And it's the thing I always remember about Mark when we played Auxerre away. We were staying in this hotel just outside Auxerre, and the local paper wrote a big story on the back page headlines: "We cannot lose tomorrow night. Well, you see, for his big fat goalkeeper." So we got it translated and made sure that we hammered it up on the notice board. And he was absolutely magnificent that night. And he was magnificent right through the campaign. But he did make a mistake that night against Bayern Munich. If you remember, I think it was 3-0 at half time. I think it was. Which meant we 5-1 down. And we played very pragmatically. I normally just played with Dave Phillips as a holding player, but that night, if you remember, I played Dave Phillips and Chris Bart-Williams as 2 holding midfield players because I knew their Bayern Munich's strength was what our strength was, and what our strength now is. They were excellent on the counter attack, hitting teams on the break. So I wanted to guard against that. Anyway, at half time in the dressing room, I kind of sensed that the players wanted to have a goal. We were 3-1, 5-1 down or something like that. But they just wanted to have a goal. So I took Chris off. And brought I can't remember who I brought on now. I brought a right winger on anyway, and moved Steve Stone into central midfield, who was more of an attacking player. Paul McGregor. I brought Paul McGregor on the right wing. And so we had a right go at them, but they just kept hitting us on the break, and obviously it was a bit of a hammering at the end of it. But I just thought the player that earned that, they earned the right to go out with a bit of glory, or try and go out with a bit of glory.
Considering the players that you had going into that season, to get to the quarterfinals of UEFA Cup was an amazing achievement. What were your expectations, or what were the owners, or the chairman, looking for from that European run? Were there any expectations on where we would get to?
None at all. Not from the board. I had no. Again, I was taking it just exactly the same way, one tie at a time. I remember the board of directors. When we went to Auxerre, who were a wonderful team, really, and we beat them 1-0 out there. Our directors were hanging over the players' tunnel like the most amazing adolescent teenagers you've ever seen in your life, shouting and screaming. They couldn't believe that we'd gone to Auxerre and beaten them 1-0. So I don't think they had any great expectations of how far we were going to go.
Yeah, and chucking Paul McGregor in as well. He got a European goal. I always remember him as that rock and roll kid.
I saw him playing at the NAV a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, he's still doing his music.
He's still around, Paul. Yeah, it's his life. He found his lifetime ambition to be a rock and roll singer. I used to say to him, "You're gonna have to make your mind up, son, one way or the other." And
Could you think he had it in him to go further? Was there that conflict between the music and the football with him?
There was a conflict, but the conflict was of his own making, and his own. Listen, football is people think being a professional footballer, it is a great life, and no doubt about that. It's a wonderful life, but it's hard, You can't be sort of semi-detached from it. You've got to give it everything. You've got to throw everything into it. And we've seen it. I won't mention any name, but a few high-profile players in the last year or two have got distracted by outside things happening. Yeah. And it's almost ruined their careers. You can't take your eye off the ball. I don't think Paul was okay. He was never going to be a top-notch Premier League player. He was okay, but I think he really would have preferred to be a rock and roll singer.
I remember his debut. I think it was away at Bolton when we lost 4-3, and you brought him and Bobby Howe on. That was a crazy game. That one. That was on ITV.
Really, I can't remember that.
Yeah. That was in the promotion season.
Right. I didn't think they'd be that far advanced in the promotion season, but I wouldn't argue with you.
Collymore scored a couple of belters that game, didn't he? Where he turned we lost the game, but that was the first time Collymore really.
Yeah. I was watching it on ITV at university with my next door neighbour who was a Bolton supporter, and we nearly had a fight over that game.
Yeah.
Right. I want to move into the fun section. Just quick reminders, guys. Frank is giving up his time, and please show some love to him in the chat. Make sure you've liked, make sure you're subscribed if you're new. Massive shout out to Daniel with the 28 months as well. Frank, for many a year, we have been having this debate about the great team under you and the current team under Forest. Well, not many, yeah, obviously for this season. We want to kind of get your take on, from the current crop that Forest have, is there anyone you would switch with? I want to kind of get a combined 11 going here. So we've, I think, well, Rob, if you want to take over here, because you've put the stats together based on appearances, and let's see if Frank would agree with this team. Chat, get involved. Let us know. Start showing your age in the chat. Do you remember this legendary team? Go on, Rob.
Yeah, so Frank, just before we start this, right, the team we've drawn up, which is like a 4-4-1-1, I've tried to do it so that it makes a comparison a little bit more possible with how Nuno sets up today, which is the 4-2-3-1. It's not an incredibly different. We fully expect you to make the case for your players, right? So, and we obviously recognise it might be a bit sensitive. We don't want you to be sort of criticising them if you don't feel comfortable to do that. But we all went through this process. I can tell you, I did my own combined 11, and only 4 players from the current team got in, and 7 from your team. Not going to say who, but I think the nice way to look at it is, if you could drop some players from the current team into that team, who would you start with?
And firstly, would you be happy with this team we've set up?
Does that represent? Because that was based on
clearly you can see it, Frank.
That was based on total appearances.
Rob, do you want to read the team out just for anybody?
Yeah, so basically, we've got Big Norm in goal, back 4 of Pierce, Chettle, Cooper, and Des Little. Midfield, Stone and Wone with Bohinen and Phillips. Obviously, Phillips are the more holding and Bohinen going forward. And then, obviously, the combo of Collymore and Roy up front.
Right.
Roy playing more in the hole behind Collymore. Do you feel that's representative of your sort of strongest 11, Frank?
Team, yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yes, that's the strongest 11. Yeah.
Right. So that's similar-ish to how Nuno plays. Now we all know that your team was very much based around Stan Collymore, and Chris Wood's not exactly the same type of striker. But if you could drop some people from the current squad into that and try and come up with some combined 11, with all respect to those folks that are on the screen now, where would you start if you were tempted?
That's a bit tricky, that, because listen, distance lends enchantment. I love those players that were there, especially that team you put out there. That was some team.
What a team!
I would think, with great respect to Des, Aina might just force his way in there. I like Aina. I think he's a really good player. I don't know, really. You're making it very difficult.
Frank,
But, I mean,
I'll tell you what, Frank.
the shape is right, and the style is very similar.
Yeah.
I mean, I was talking to Steve Stone just the other day, and he was saying how Forest are playing this counter-attacking style that was really the way we like to play. At home, I think we were a bit more positive and open than maybe the current team is. But basically, we were a counter-attacking team as well, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Frank, I'll tell you what. That is my combined 11. I would only take, and bless him, there's little out, and I'll put Einar in. The rest, I don't know if it's my nostalgia from childhood.
Could I push it a bit further then? Because I this is what I hope Frank would be like defending his guys. What about Murillo and Milenkovic versus Chettle and Cooper?
What about them? Listen, I love those two. Milenkovic is a proper centre half.
Yeah.
Like Colin Cooper was, he's a bit bigger than Colin, but Colin was the same type of player, a combative, a proper defender.
And he was a real threat going forward as well, wasn't it? Sorry, go on.
Yeah, very strong in the air for his size.
He took some wicked free kicks, Cooper. Actually,
yeah,
he was a threat going forward. Yeah.
Murillo might push Chet. Although he disappointed me yesterday, Murillo. I thought he gave the ball away too much during the game.
Yes,
but he does look a great prospect. But Chettle obviously was. I mean, Chettle had been there a long time when I got there. He was a very experienced player, you know, and a great pro.
Just a quick one on that, Frank, because we've got Yates in the team who's been through he's the last one who's been through the youth academy and he's still in the team. Chettle is another one who came through our academies, he was certainly at the club for a very long time. Does that really make a difference for a homegrown player, somebody who's been around the club, to be part of that team? And does that make a difference in the dressing room as such?
Well, I don't think so. It's nice to have them. Don't worry, you know. I'm not belittling that. It's good to have them. If nothing else, it gives people in the academy a little bit of, you know, something to look at and think, well, it's worth the job we're doing here, you know. But I think there's a lot of, I don't know what the word is really. It talks about local players and how local players, the crowd always treat them well, and it's always much better than. Listen, I was a local player at Newcastle United, and I used to get the dog's abuse for years, like, you know, from the crowd. Now, they obviously thought I couldn't play, otherwise I wouldn't have, you know, because there was no other reason. I never reacted to them, but I used to get a lot of abuse from the crowd. And I believe Yatesy does now, you know. I'm not aware of that, but I know he's not everybody's cup of tea. It's good for the supporters, I think, if there's a couple of local lads in to see it, and it's certainly good for the academy. But in terms of the dressing room itself and the team, the only thing that matters is, are they good enough? Are they good enough? You know, I mean, I remember 3 years ago when the youth team got to the FA Youth Cup final.
Yes.
People were saying, "Wow, we've got these really good young players in the team, all going to be pushing into the first team." Where are they now?
Yeah.
There's none of them at the club, you know. So it's very, very difficult anyway for any young player to push his way into a Premier League first team now, especially here now. Yeah, I mean, you know that Yatesy is the only one who's survived. But the clubs have to have an academy. It's a good thing for their image. It's a good thing for the local area, and it's a good thing if occasionally one of them does break through and become the regular in the team. But it doesn't happen very often now in the Premier League. I mean, before Yates, was it Brennan?
Yes. Yep.
And not much before that, you know. Or Joe.
They used Frank. They used as a bit of money stuff with the PSR and all the financial regulations now because of the profitability of them all going onto the bottom line. So it's kind of lost a bit of it, hasn't it, with that?
That's certainly changed the nature of the game. You're right there. That's how we got Elliot Anderson, really.
Yeah.
If you sell a player who's come through your academy, it's pure profit in financial terms. But it shouldn't. That shouldn't really. I don't like that. I don't like the thought of that. If that's the aim of having an academy just to make money out of it. I don't think that's the right thing, you know.
So I've got a question for you, Frank. Actually, looking at these players, you got Pearce, Cooper, Wone, all of which were brilliant at free kicks. Now, why do you think Forest don't score from direct free kicks anymore? Because I can't remember one in the last 3 years. And it used to be such an important part of our game.
Listen, I'm sorry I can't answer that. Instead, I'll tell you a funny story about Piercy. When I first came to the club as manager, I had all these highfalutin ideas about we're going to be taking clever free kicks and clever this and clever that. And we're doing some free kick routines one day, and Piercy said, "Gaffer, I've got a good routine that works quite well for us, like, you know." I said, "Well, go on, Stuart, set it up." Then I said, "What do you do?" Like, he says, "Well, we put the ball down, and Warney stands on the ball, and he pushes it 2 yards to the side, and I smash it in the corner of the net." I said, "Oh, that'll do for me, Stuart."
Was there ever?
It did work quite a bit, though.
Was there ever any conflict on who would take it? So, Frank, your thumb's just over the camera there, mate. We can't quite see you.
Sorry.
Yeah.
No, there was never any debate. Piercy or Warney just decided amongst themselves, you know, which area it was in, and who fancied doing it, you know.
Yeah. We had a few, didn't we? We had David Phillips could hit a free kick as well. So we had a few players in there.
Yeah, David wasn't bad.
Who is the best in your opinion? Who is the best in your opinion?
They've got no one in the current side that's prepared to have a shot. I mean, is it just not part of the game anymore? Because I mean, I'm used to. In those days, we were getting like half a dozen or even a dozen goals from direct free kicks. Pierce scored 14 from left back, no penalties.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Listen, I don't know. You know, we had James Ward-Prowse here, you know, who was supposedly the best, one of the best free kick takers in the business, but he struggled to get in our team.
Yeah.
I'd like to see Murillo get on them, you know, if he can tonk them from a distance. But no, you're right. It's something it seems to go out of the game a little bit.
So who was a better free kick taker, Frank? In your opinion, between Wone and Pearce? Like, Wone's one against Spurs will always live in my memory, and I'm talking about the replay one. That one from the edge of the box just baffles me how he got that in. Obviously, Pearce thunderbolted them in, but who did you fancy more? Like, who did you feel more confident with over the ball?
Well, listen, it would depend where it was. If it was just outside the area, I would fancy Stuart with this thing of getting Ian or somebody just to push it a couple of yards to the side, because it's very difficult to get a ball over the wall and down again when you're literally just on the edge of the area.
Yeah.
It's easier if you're about, what would it be, 6-7 yards outside the area. From there, it's easier to get it up and down again. So anything close in on the box, I'd kind of favour Stuart. But anywhere else, maybe Ian, you know. But there wasn't a lot to choose between the two of them.
Just going back to this team stuff, I got to ask you about Roy versus Morgan Gibbs-White. Like, for me, Roy is my GOAT. I loved him at Forest. What a player he was. So I would be picking him ahead of Morgan Gibbs-White in my all-time 11. Do you see any similarities between the two players? Do you think, like, could Morgan Gibbs-White have comfortably fitted into a Frank Clark team back then?
Well, listen, he's a very talented, very good player, but I'm not sure that he would. He's not the same type of player as Brian Roy. Brian Roy was a silky. He was a front player, really. He didn't work as hard as Gibbs White. Gibbs White is a real grafter. You could put them both in your team, really, and Gibbs White maybe play with Roy and Collymore, you know. But then you might have to leave Bohinen out to get Gibbs White in, you know. So it's.
But Frank, when you signed Brian Roy, he was a winger, wasn't he? So did you push him into that central position, or was that something he wanted to explore and suggested to you?
It was a little bit of many things. But you're right, he was a winger, and I only saw him play once on the wing for Holland.
Yeah,
when I went on that aborted trip to America to try and sign him.
Yeah,
and he wasn't very good that night, I have to say. But when I signed him, two things happened really. He did make it fairly obvious that he didn't want to play on the left wing, that he would prefer to play as a front player. And Ian Woan, who was, you know, the left winger, left-sided attacker in the team, had said to himself, well, he looks at he's a left winger, he's coming to take my place. He's not going to get my place, I'm going to show them. And Ian became a better player.
Yeah.
Ian's always had great talent, but he was a little bit of a stroller. Him and I used to have quite a lot of healthy discussions about him running about a bit more. But the fact of Brian Roy coming into the club made Ian a better player.
Agreed.
Because he said to himself, and he said to me, he said, he ain't going to get my place. And I said, well, that'll do for me, son. You'll get your chance. So it seemed a no-brainer. You know, we decided. Brian and Stan were both individuals. They were never going to be like a pair working together, making goals for each other and that sort of thing. But they were both great individuals. So we came up with a way of playing. We had two strong banks of four with a goalkeeper, and those two, and getting the ball up to them, we knew they'd score enough goals to make it worthwhile having them, you know. But that was how it was. It was a bit of him and a bit of me, because I didn't fancy him too much as a left winger either.
Yeah. Robinez, would you change anything in that combined 11?
So, yeah, I've got two more questions to ask about. So, probably the best dribbler in our current team is Hudson-Odoi, and I'm just wondering whether you could make room for him anywhere in that squad. It's a tough one, isn't it? Whether on the left or in the middle or on the right.
I love Ian Woan. I wouldn't take Ian Woan out.
I love Steve Stone. I wouldn't take him out.
I mean, I wouldn't take Woan or Stone out of the team. Stoney. When I came to the club, Steve Stone was a central midfield player. He had two broken legs before he was 21. He was going nowhere, really.
Oh, Frank, you've just gone quiet. I don't know if you've covered the mic.
I think you covered up the mic.
Oh, I might have done.
Yeah, I can hear you now, yeah.
Am I there again? Am I back?
Yeah.
You're back.
And I just thought he didn't have enough guile, if you like, to be a central midfield player. But I thought because of his great energy and his great character and his great will to win, he could make a living out of the game as a wide right midfield player, not a winger, but a kind of a wide midfield player. And of course, he was terrific, and he got in the England squad.
He was keeping David Beckham out, wasn't he?
And would have stayed in had he not fractured his knee bone. You know? Yeah, that's right. It was his kneecap rather, not his knee bone. So yeah, I wouldn't want to do either of those out.
So the other one, which is the place that we can't go yet, which is a comparison of Collymore and Chris Wood, because totally different players with totally different qualities. I think everyone I put this to says, "Oh, it's Collymore, no question."
Yeah.
And I feel that's a bit unfair to Chris Wood because he's in the conversation. So obviously on the eye test, Collymore did things that nobody else could do, right? And we remember 30 years on. But objectively, on every single stat, shots per goal, goals per minute, everything, Chris Wood is way ahead of all the other strikers in the Premier League at the moment. So what's your view on that one, Frank? Would you like to have Chris available in that squad?
Not until Collymore, no.
No.
No, there's no comparison, is there?
Collymore was a wonderfully talented player. A very complex character, unfortunately, but a wonderfully talented player who should have had a cupboard full of England caps, but didn't for whatever reasons. I wouldn't swap Stan for anybody, even though he could keep me away.
Oh, Frank, you've just covered the mic again, mate.
Yeah.
Right. That better?
Yeah, I can hear you now, yeah.
Like that, yeah. Okay, so not even close for you. Not even close. You're not even having a conversation about Chris Wood.
I like Chris. Chris, listen, I hold my hands up. I was wrong about Chris when he first came. I wasn't impressed at all. I was quite annoyed with Newcastle. I thought they'd done a job on us, really.
Yeah, with Shelby as well.
He's proven me completely wrong. He's a great lad. He's a great team player. He works his socks off for the team, and his goal scoring record is right up there with the best. Yeah. But I wouldn't swap him for Collymore.
Yeah, but only word compromise is I'd love Stan's ability coupled with Chris Wood's temperament. If you could pair those two, then
now you'd be talking really world class.
Yeah.
But it's such a shame.
That's like having Wone's left foot and Hudson Odoi's right foot. You'd be the ultimate player. You'd be Ronaldo then, wouldn't you?
Yeah, that'll be all right.
I can dream.
It is interesting. I've put a poll up in the chat. Who would you pick? If you haven't voted, get your votes in. 85% have said Collymore, 86 now, and 14 have said Chris Wood. I think that's a generational thing. I think if they haven't seen Collymore play, one, you missed out.
Yeah.
I don't think there's...
Of the players, Frank, of all the players that you've played with in your day and you've managed and you've even watched, where does he rank? Where does Stan rank in that hierarchy?
He ranks at the top. He had everything physically. He was 6'3", great physique. He was powerful. He was quick. He could score goals from 30 yards. And he could score tap-ins.
Yeah,
he could score. He could win the ball in the air. He wasn't brilliant in the air, but he could win the ball in the air. He could dribble past people. He could do everything, but he didn't want it badly enough, you know. It's not enough to. It's not enough to have talent to be a professional footballer, and Stan didn't really want it badly enough. It's a great shame.
Yeah, real shame.
Fantastic. Yeah, they're all saying that goal at Peterborough, Wimbledon, Old Trafford. Oh, what a player! What a player!
Well, I think one of his best was at Wolverhampton. At Wolves.
I agree. Where he turned them on the halfway line,
he picked the ball up from a throw-in inside our half, and nobody else touched the ball until their goalkeeper was picking it out of the net. It was an incredible goal. And I'd caught him breaking the curfew the night before. I was going to fine him 2 weeks' wages. And Liam O'Kane taught me how to doing it. He said he'll win the game for us today. Don't do it, boss. So I didn't, and he did win the game for us.
Yeah, he got liberties, didn't he? But he earned them on the pitch.
Sorry?
100%.
He got liberties sometimes, didn't he? But he earned that right off the pitch, didn't he?
He did.
For what he was doing,
Yeah, he did, yeah.
Frank, just to say, Collymore is quite busy in the media these days. Do you ever speak to him? Are you still in touch, or not in touch anymore?
I see him. Yeah, I see him occasionally, and we're good friends. We're okay.
That's good.
Yeah, and there's no bitterness about him.
Frank, can you get him on our podcast?
Yeah, how does he feel about Forest now? Because we get mixed signals from him. I have to say, is that fair? We get mixed signals about.
He's a Villa fan, isn't he? Yeah.
Well, you discuss Forest with him.
Well, I mean, I don't know. He's a Villa fan, but he, I don't see. And he's a pundit, isn't he? You know, he gets paid to have his opinions, and occasionally he probably might have to criticise Forest, but that's what being a pundit's all about. You know, I can't stand most of them, but they're entitled to an opinion and they get paid to give it. So it's something we have to put up with.
But the thing is, right, after he went to Liverpool for $8.5 million, I was at his return to the City Ground and we won that game 1-0. Steve Stone scored. And for 70 minutes, the whole crowd was booing Collymore, and it was really gave him a nasty reception. Yeah, well, I felt guilty about that. But at the same time, it was because we were terrified of him, and we were so relieved when he went off without scoring against us. So I do wonder whether he's maybe taken that in the wrong way over the years, because that was a mark of respect. That
he broke
our hearts.
That's the game, isn't it? You know, I wasn't too worried about it. I think it put him off his game a little bit. You know, I don't think he particularly enjoyed that, but they did. You know, the fans were entitled to feel a bit let down the way he left us. But I had a degree of sympathy with him. It was the club's fault, really. When I signed Stan, he didn't sign on a particularly big contract. He didn't have an agent, and there was no big time Charlie thing. I want this, I want that, and but I said to him, "Come and do your stuff for us, and I'll improve it. I'll give you a better contract." Well, he did his stuff, didn't he? You know, his first season, he got us played a big part in us getting promoted. I went to the board. And they said, "Well, no, we're not giving him a new contract. He's got another 2 years left on this one." I said, "But I promised him that if he did his stuff, no, we're not going to do it." I said, "Well, you might suffer for that," and that's what happened. He got a little bit disillusioned about that. It didn't affect his performances, but I knew it was in the back of his mind. And he got in with the Spice Boys from Liverpool at the time, and then towards the end of that season, the board said, "Oh well, we better offer Stan a new contract." I said, "You're too bloody late."
Yeah.
If they'd done it early, you think he would have stayed on?
I think he might have done. We had a better chance if we'd given him a better contract. As we went into the Premier League.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. So, once you got promoted, they didn't give him a increased salary. That's ridiculous.
No.
Frank, I know we've gone on for nearly an hour and a half. There are a few questions. I just want to bring up a couple of the questions from the guys in the crowd. This one's a bit of a fascinating one. I don't know if you can clear this up. Was Baggio actually ever linked with Forest? We had Thomas Darlene linked back in those days as well. Was there any truth? Roberto Baggio, the Italian. Was that all fake news?
Not when I was there. No.
Were there any other big names that we're not aware of that were linked and you couldn't quite get them signed over the line?
No.
So Brian Roy was the biggest name outside of obviously of Collymore and
he was. Yeah, Brian was. He was a big name. But we're not going to get him really. I had to pull a bit of a not a contract, but Fred Reacher and myself had to
charm him.
Had to keep it from the rest of the board.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if I've told you this story before. You might have heard it before. Stop me if you have.
Yeah, the
But
one on the bus.
We
with his wife.
We got promoted, and I went to the board obviously and said, "Is there any money to bring some one or two better players in?" I said, "I think we're all right. I just think we might need a little bit of extra quality to the team." Oh no chance of that. Like, you can forget that. So I'm thinking, oh, that's great. Like, anyway, I got a phone call from an agent asking what I was looking for, and I said, "Well, I'm not looking for anything. We've got no money, but I'd love to sign a left-sided attacker." And he said, "What, you mean somebody like Brian Roy?" I said, "Don't take the mickey. I said we couldn't get him." He said, "Well," he said, "he's playing for Foggia in Italy. They've just been relegated, and they've got to sell players, and he's the only one that can sell, and you can get him for about 2 million." So I went to Fred. Fred was chairman, of course, great chairman for me, was very supportive. I explained it to him, and he said, "Well," he said, "all right," he said, "just keep it between us and run with it and see where you go." So we went with it, and we agreed that if it came off, we'd pay Foggia 2 million. And Brian seemed quite interested in coming.
Yeah.
And I went out. He was playing in the World Cup squad with Holland in America, '94, if you remember.
Yeah.
And the agent who tipped me off said, "Listen, I've spoken to the Dutch squad. If you go out, you want to meet him, you can come out of the camp and you can have a chat with him." Oh, I thought, oh, that's okay. So I jumped on the plane to Miami. That's not like going just down the road, you know. And I get off the plane, and the agent's waiting for me. And he said, "I've got some bad news and some good news." I said, "Oh, you better tell me the bad news first." He said, "The Dutch manager's changed his mind. You can't meet him. You can't talk to him." And I'm thinking, Christ, I've flown all that way to Miami, and I'm not even going to be able to get to see him. I said, "What's the good news?" He said, "I've got you a seat on the Dutch officials' coach to the game tonight. They're playing that night in Miami." Well, I said, "That's all right. I may as well go to the game. I'm there, and I'm not coming back till the next day."
Yeah.
He says, "But when you get on the coach," he said, "go and sit up the back and keep your head down, like, but you'll be all right." So I go and sit up the back, and I'm sitting amongst the players' wives, believe it or not. And I get sat next to Brian's wife, who was an aspiring actress. And she's a bit worried about how far it is between London and Nottingham. So I thought, I said, "Well, 20 minutes, half an hour." And she never held that against me. Like, she did understand that. Anyway, I watched him play that night, and like, it wasn't very impressive. And I came back. Anyway, we spoke to Fred, and he said, "Right, we'll do the deal then." And that was it. And the rest of the board knew about it was the day he was coming across to sign for us, and the agent had put it all in the newspaper. Somebody must have paid him or something to get this story. And we had a board meeting that morning, and I've got to tell you, it was a bit icy in the board meeting. They weren't happy at all. But I managed to persuade them. I'm saying to them, "Look, this will be a wonderful thing for the football club, for the players, and for the supporters. Forest are signing a current World Cup player. So we can't afford not to do it, you know. And he'll make us a better team, and it'll give us credibility." And eventually, Fred and I, took us about an hour to persuade the rest of the board, but we managed to do it, and that was how. I mean,
You've just gone on mute, Frank.
You've just gone on mute.
We lost you, Frank.
Frank.
Is that the cliffhanger as well? Can you hear us?
We can't hear you.
Yeah, you may need to drop out and come back in again. Oh.
No, we've lost audio.
Amazing the lack of ambition in the board those days. Isn't it?
I still can't hear you, Frank.
Yeah, may need to drop back out and come back in again, Frank.
I don't know. Should we call it anyway? To be fair.
Yeah.
What do you want to do?
Frank?
Let's call it.
I think it's on the phone. Frank, the best thing is just go out and come back in again. That's how it fixed it beforehand.
right on the cliff edge as well. On the cliff.
I know. Can you imagine if we'd had Marinakis
We'll have
back then?
to do it. Guess we'll have
I
to
was
do.
gonna say the chat is
the third
saying
part.
like, could you imagine Frank with Marinakis' money when he was doing all the wheeling and dealing? It's absolutely crazy. Can you still hear us, Frank?
Frank, if you can hear us, it's muted. It might be best off just quitting and coming back in because that fixed it before.
Yeah.
It's
Let's
not
get
fixed.
those quick reminder. Get those likes up, guys, if you're sitting there enjoying this with the great man Frank. Make sure you've subscribed as well. Yeah, we still can't hear you, Frank. We still can't hear you. If you jump out and then jump back in, I think that fixed it last time.
Fixes it. Yeah, we don't know what's causing it.
Yeah, and no PSR. No PSR.
Oh God, yeah, PSR. Can you imagine?
It would have been just a dream. Exactly.
Even so, only one of our current players got in the combined 11, right? So
yeah, and let's be clear, Rob. You're just arguing the opposite case. You would still pick Collymore over Wood, surely.
Yeah, I just think it's disrespectful to Wood that nobody's even considering him because I do think he is.
He's up against. Yeah, he's not up against just anyone though. He's up against Stan Collymore.
Is he the best striker we've had since Collymore though? Because if that's
without a doubt. In terms of his record, 100%. You can't argue with it. His strike rate, like you said, his
Frank, let me try and put him backstage and bring him on. Does that Frank, he's there? No.
I think it's the phone itself. Maybe maybe just need to
I think he's going to join back in on the phone. Yeah, take him off stage.
Here's technology, guys.
That out. I mean,
what other questions have we got? What other questions?
I got like a million more questions. I got Matt's question from Forest all over as well, but we may have to do a part 3 on this, boys. I just feel like it's chat. Would you like to see a part 3 with Frank Clark? I can see him just trying to sort stuff out backstage. But yeah, let us know how you're feeling about a part 3, and if there's any more questions, there's some yeses already in the chat on that. It's just like, do we look at these things, boys, with a bit of child goggles on? Do you know what I mean? Like, do we look back at this team and I still think it's a better team, but I don't know if that's me as a kid.
I'll tell you what was different then, and this is going to really wind people up now, right? So during that 94-95 season, I was at university. And I used to come back as much as I could, and you could literally just turn up to the ground on the day, buy a ticket, and go in. Can you believe that? Forest third in the table, and we were getting attendance of about 24,000, and you could make the decision on the day if you wanted to go to the game, and you could just turn up, pay, and
the
go
trend end was getting redone
in.
around that time as well, wasn't it?
Sure that was the case in that promotion season.
Yes, it was. It was.
Yeah.
None of this that you have these days where you have to be like, you've got these different tiers of membership and you're hoping that there might be a few scraps left over.
Going back.
I've got you back.
There we go. Yes,
sorry
got you back.
Okay.
I don't know that you or me, but there you go.
No,
yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you now, Frank.
Right.
So I think just a couple of things to finish off on, Frank, really. There's the Geordies want to know loads about the Newcastle days as well. I guess we'll save that for another stream, or we'll get one of our Geordie correspondents to speak to you on that. But one question I had, Frank, was when Collymore went, who was on your shortlist to replace him? Who did you want to get?
And how much of that money did you have to reinvest?
Was made available. Yeah.
Well, Kevin Campbell was top of my shortlist with Chris Bott-Williams because I knew them both.
Yeah,
I'd had Chris, obviously, and an apprentice at Leyton Orient. He'd grown up with me, really, and I'd had Kevin on loan at Leyton Orient, and I knew what a great player he was. What a great lad he was. I knew that he had a back operation, but I believed that he was over that. And so they were the two. And I was going to keep the rest of the money for a rainy day. because we got, I think we got about, was it 8.5?
8.5, wasn't it?
Yeah. Stan. Kevin cost us 2.5, and Bart Williams cost us 2.2, I think. So I've got to keep the rest for a rainy day. And I made two big mistakes. I made a mistake with Kevin Campbell. Kevin eventually turned out to be a great buy for the club, you know. But when I bought him, he hadn't totally recovered from his back operation, and he subsequently had quite a lot of injuries that season. If you remember, he hardly played any games at all. And that was my fault. I take the blame for that. Hubris got the better of me. When we signed him, the club doctor, Lynn Jarrett, wonderful man, great, lovely man, pulled me to one side and said, "Listen," he said, "I think you should hang back on this. I don't think he's 100% yet recovered. He'll be okay, but I don't think he's 100%. And me, having just finished third in the Premier League, got carried away with myself and overruled him, really, and I shouldn't have done. So we signed him, and as I'm sure you all know, he missed most of that season.
Yeah.
He was in and out, wasn't he?
Yeah. And the other
was that the season where we beat? Was it Coventry off the bat? Who scored the hat trick?
We beat. Yes, we did. First game of the season. We went to Coventry and we beat them 3-0, I think.
Yeah.
And Ron Atkinson, who was Coventry manager, told me after the game he was going to have a punt on us winning the league.
Wow.
I've got a question about that. Go on, carry on, Frank.
And well, we didn't win the league, obviously. And then the rainy day arrived. Actually, we were going on a tour, a pre-season tour, and Kevin was injured, Brian was injured, and Jason Lee was our third striker. Now Jason was, he was useful. He wasn't a Stan Collymore, but he was a handy lad to have. But he came to me just before we were going to go on this tour, and said he couldn't go on the tour. His wife had just had a baby, and there was a problem, and he couldn't leave her. If he left her, he was afraid she might top herself and all that. Now. So there I am. I'm left with no strikers just before the season started. So the rainy day arrived, and I made that big mistake and signed Andre Salenzi.
Oh yeah.
And that was $1.5 million wasted, really. But that was down to me. I accept total responsibility for that. It didn't work out.
Yeah, but you were allowed a mistake after the signings you had made, and even Kevin Campbell ended up being great for us, you know?
Yeah. And just on those two players, Frank, obviously you brought them both to the club, and it's such a shame to be saying rest in peace to them both, you know. Did you attend the funerals for either of those players, or were you invited to go?
I couldn't find out when they were. I'd obviously lost a bit of touch with them, but I'd seen Chris. He came to a game at the City Ground 2 years ago now, would it be?
Yeah.
And he looked wonderful. You know, he looked in great shape, and he was working in America, doing very well. Yeah, it was a massive blow when he died. I had the same with Kevin. You know, two great lads.
Genuinely, yeah.
So that was where most of the Collymore money went. You know. But they got $5 million back for Kevin, I think.
Yeah, so no, Campbell and Bart Williams went on to be great players for us. It's just I don't feel either of them, because Bart Williams was very young in that season. I think he was only about like 20 years old when you bought him. So he was with us for another sort of 6 or 7 years.
Yeah, I believe that. Yeah, no,
so it was a good investment.
They both eventually had good careers. Yeah.
I was going to ask Frank. about Big Ron putting a bet on us. Do you remember at the start of that season, on the very first match of the day, Des Lynam said, "What do you think about Forest's chance of winning the title?" And Alan Hansen famously said, "Oh, that team will never win the championship." Do you remember that, Frank?
No, I don't. I don't
Oh,
remember.
right, okay. It's very diplomatic because Alan Hansen came in for a bit of stick from Forest fans at the time.
Right.
I don't know if anybody else remembers. So you don't even remember that?
No, I don't know.
I can't remember seeing that. To be
I don't
honest.
think I used to. I don't think I watched those programs at that time.
All right. So am I making that up, or am I? Do I remember that
can't remember
correctly?
saying that.
I didn't remember it when you told me about it, but obviously I was a lot
He
younger
did
than
say
you, Bob,
that.
so I trust
Someone in
your
the
memory
chat,
on that.
he did say that, didn't he?
Oh, the
Surely
chat
I'm not
one, though.
inventing
Yeah.
that. Okay.
Chat one.
That's what you
Listen,
went for it.
Frank, we've got a million more questions, but we've
we've
kept you for so long, and I appreciate it so much. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
coming.
It's getting near my bedtime, but thank you very much.
Yeah,
No, it's a real honor.
apologies.
Real honor to have you.
Yeah.
Sorry for the sound problems.
No,
Oh, no
not at
worries.
all, man.
No,
I
that's
think
all
the chat just happy to see you and hear all these stories, and they're desperately asking to bring you back on again down the line
And they're
as well.
also desperately asking to bring back Vatash. So a lot of comments
Oh,
for
no,
missing
Hey,
Vatash.
listen, I look old enough as it is without that, but for putting that up, they'll think I'm 100.
So, guys, make sure you show Frank the love by making sure you've hit that like button. Make sure you've subscribed as well. We've got a match preview for the Arsenal game tomorrow, so make sure you tune in for that as well. And we will see you on that one. Frank, don't go anywhere just yet. We'll say
Okay.
bye to the chat. Come on, you Reds.
Right.